Hello, and welcome to Voices of the Canyon, where we dive into all things songwriting. I'm your host, Andrea Cunningham, and I'm here to take you on a journey through the minds of the talented songwriters here at Grand Canyon University. Today, we're opening up about what it's like to collaborate with another artist, the beginning stages of songwriting, and the story behind the song Like You. Here to share her knowledge on these topics and give us an insight into her musical journey is Sarah Renay.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. This is an awesome opportunity.
Oh, thank you for coming on. I'm so grateful that I get to talk to you and just hear more about your process. It's so exciting. So to start off, I really want to dive deep into, I guess, your journey into songwriting. Like, how old were you when you first started writing music?
Well, I remember the very first song I ever wrote. I was sitting on the swing at my grandparents' property in Northern California, and it was a little tune about the birds.
That's so
and
sweet.
so it was a couple stanzas, but it's just the birds, they fly so high up in the sky. And
That's so cute.
that was the very first song I ever wrote. And after that, I went on to, write one or two songs that would just be in my head all the time. But it wasn't until I was about 16 that I got inspired to songwriting that I seriously started writing down my songs and putting effort into my work.
That's so cool. Whenever you were really little, did you feel like, were you like aware that you were writing music? I feel like when you're little, you're just kind of humming. You don't even like process what you're doing. Were you like, oh my gosh, I just wrote the cutest little song?
Absolutely. Well, I would think, okay, well, which word would fit better in the rhyme here?
Mm-hmm.
And I would see the different birds and I think, okay, well, this word would fit better for that spot. So
that is so cute. Can you like describe what your music was like in the beginning?
Mm-hmm. A lot of it was worship music to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I have a huge heart for worship music specifically because of my faith in the Lord. And so that's the inspiration where everything starts from. But then secondly, my music usually had to reflect something about how God was working in my life.
Right.
And so I wrote a worship song when I was 12. I still remember that one. And then 16, 17, 18 years old, that was just a huge driving factor. Later, when I became a little bit older, end of high school and college, songwriting became more of an outlet for me in my own journal.
Right, yeah. Whenever you were writing worship music, were you like performing that in your church or was it kind of like just for you?
This was just for me.
Oh.
I was so scared of showing other people. I would not show anyone else what I was working on because I thought it was embarrassing or cringy.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. Did you feel like growing up, like you were confident in your songwriting? Obviously, you felt like it was, like you just said, a little bit embarrassing, but like who did you show, or was it literally nobody?
I don't think I really showed anyone a song until I was 16 and I had worked on it so much that I felt like it was okay to show the world.
Yeah. How did you feel like you kind of gained that confidence in yourself and like sharing your music with others? Because that can be a hard journey to get to.
Absolutely. It was when my family and I actually drove to Nashville. We were doing a long road trip and we ended up going inside the studio of Michael Tate from DC Talk and Newsboys. And one of his producers, Ben Calhoun from Citizen Way, was working with a student. She was my age. She was 16. And she was working on a song that I loved. And I thought, I see myself in her and I can do this. Why am I afraid to put my stuff out there?
How do you think your songwriting skills have developed from then and now?
Oh my goodness. My songwriting is a lot different. Before I was focused on simple structure and just trying to get the right words out that would fit in a rhyme. But now I try to think more outside of the box. In my songwriting, I want to use words to describe a feeling rather than say the feeling is there.
Yeah, that's cool. Who was your biggest inspiration in songwriting? When you were really little, do you feel like you had like an inspiration?
I always loved the Christian artists that I would hear that were young or female, like Jamie Grace and Britt Nicole.
Yeah.
They had such fun songs. Yes, and so that made me want to go into it. And I always thought, I want to see myself on stage one day, and this is a great way to get there. And then as I was growing up, when I first started, definitely seeing how other artists had made it in the industry and trying to make my stuff sound like theirs. It wasn't until I was older that I realized I wanted to make stuff sound like me. And so a lot of that songwriting shaped into me following artists such as Matthew West and his storytelling. I also drew inspiration from Michael W. Smith and a couple other Christian artists, I would say.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you feel like when you're writing songs right now, you're really focusing on like telling a story?
Yes, absolutely. My focus has shifted from wanting to be on stage to wanting to tell a story. I understand that so many people are just looking for something to express themselves, and music has a way of not only expressing the mind, but the heart and the soul as well. And so with that, most of my songs that I write are based off of a story. And so those are the reasons why I do it, and I do it for the people of whom I'm writing. Yeah,
oh, that's really cool. Whenever you're writing, are you kind of thinking of other people, or are you just trying to get your own story out?
It depends on what the song or the emotion that I'm feeling. All of my songs start with an emotion, and oftentimes it's from someone else's story. For example, we had a really dear friend of ours, a mother who just loved the Lord, and she ended up getting stage 4 cancer and passing away. And as soon as I heard that news, it had been a long battle, and she was ready to be home with the Lord. And so when she did finally pass, I ended up writing a song. It just came to me about how her smile was the biggest smile and how it showed the joy of the Lord. When it came to an inspiration as powerful as that, the words just flow right off of my mind and end up being a really quick process to finish the song.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I feel like a lot of times when writing music that can be like really emotional, especially about something like that, like finding the words to like put what you're feeling can be really, really hard. So like the fact that you felt like it did feel kind of simple, like finishing that
absolutely
like is really cool. And like I loved that lyric that you said. I feel like that's so beautiful.
Absolutely. It's so real. My own father almost passed away when I was he had a couple different scares when I was 9 to 14. And so just realizing that our time is short, and for those who do end up passing away, like we have a story that we can tell, and we can tell their story, and I think music is a beautiful way to do it.
Yeah. What was your songwriting journey like? Do you feel like it kind of came naturally to you, or was it something you had to work pretty hard at?
That's a good question. I have so many takes or scratched out verses from songs that have absolutely bombed. Not necessarily because I've put them out there, but just because I don't like them myself. And so it takes a lot of revision. Oftentimes I'll record a voice memo on my phone and write down a couple lyrics and then come back to it a year later and finally finish the chorus. Or I would say a lot of my songwriting and how well it does based off of the inspiration. If the inspiration and emotion is really powerful, then oftentimes my writing reflects that and becomes a lot better.
Yeah. Do you feel like usually whenever you get, like you just mentioned, like having like a year separation between finishing a song, do you think that like makes it better, or does it feel like almost like you kind of have like an emotional distance from it than when you first started?
Oftentimes that is the case. I would say my better stuff comes from a single session. However, the better stuff becomes great when I can reflect on it a year later. Yeah. So if a song sits in the vault for a while and then I look back on it with a fresh perspective, that's the best way to do it. Also, inviting other collaborators to come in and say, hey, can you analyze this? It's near and dear to my heart. It's obviously a touchy, emotional song. Yeah. But can you look at it from a different perspective? And that's when songs become really good. Right. And I've noticed that myself.
Yeah, definitely. Growing up, did you have someone to guide you with your songwriting, or was it something you kind of had to develop and figure out on your own?
A lot of it was me figuring it out on my own. I watched a couple YouTube videos about, how a song structure should be, but I grew up playing piano and ended up teaching myself guitar. So with that background, I knew basic musicality, but it was the lyricism that came later.
What was the hardest part about songwriting for you? Is it an aspect that's still challenging at times?
The hardest part is putting my songs out there, allowing it to be available for critique. These songs are close to me, and they almost seem like a child that I'm proud of. And so when somebody comes in and says, "Oh, I don't like this about it," it's insulting to my character, and I shouldn't take it as such, but that's usually where I find myself. So I'm scared of putting my songs out there.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I feel like just opening yourself up to criticism is really hard and can be like kind of a crazy journey to go through, especially if it's something that like took you like a year to finish. Yeah. Like, like I've been creating and developing the song for a year just for someone to come and be like, oh, I don't, it's hard. It can be hard.
Especially when it has to do with something you've gone through yourself personally. You don't want to, they're going to think that I'm super depressed now because I wrote a sad line, or, they're going to think I'm super weird because I mentioned this one thing that nobody's thought of for years. It's a tie of all of those things together.
Yeah, I totally get that, especially because like, I feel like it's easier to show people songs about like maybe just a story that popped into your head, but like whenever it's a song about like something emotional you went through, like that is so scary.
Yes,
yeah,
I understand that completely.
I actually want to talk about your most recent song that you released. I think it's so pretty, and I love the lyrics and I love the story in it. So what was the inspiration for that song?
That's for the song Like You. That song my cousin and I wrote. I was going through a time of thinking about the future a lot more. I was going into my sophomore year of college, which to many would seem like a very young point in my life, but I'm such a planner, and so thinking future-wise, and I was dealing with a lot of questions as, am I a woman of God who's worthy of marriage? Am I the woman that I can see myself in my mother? And through that thought process of a couple months, I realized I really appreciate my mom and everything she's done for me, and the woman that she is, I can see myself turning into her.
Yeah.
So my cousins were in town at the time, and my cousin Madeline Grace on the album, she's incredibly talented with her lyrics. And so combined with my music, that I sat down at the piano and I said, hey, I would like to write about this. Can we just crash course and just write about it and work together? And she rolled her eyes, because at the time she was a junior in high school. And so for her, these big questions were non-existent.
Yeah.
So as I sat there, I just wanted to say, I told her, I said, Madeline, let's write more metaphorical. I want to use real analogies rather than just saying, I'm sad. Use something to represent that sadness that we see every day in life. And so that's how we started off. The first line is, after I said goodbye, just talking about how as we pull away from our moms as we get older too, these are symbols of life. Leaving on a flight, walking down the aisle, moving away from home, having a child. These are all things that girls can experience in life, and how I saw it all in my mom first.
Yeah. So do you feel like it was written with your mother in mind specifically, or is it a song that's dedicated to the experience of mothers and daughters everywhere?
It started off with an experience with my mom specifically, but Madeline's mom and my mom are both sisters, and so both of us have just been extremely blessed, and so both of us wrote from that perspective. We also knew that in order for this song to be applicable to others, we didn't want to just have experiences from our own personal lives, but write it in such a way that so many others can relate to it. And,
yeah.
I can share it to other moms too.
Definitely. So what was the collaboration process for this song like? Like, how did it go?
We sat down. I started playing with a couple keys on the piano. I found a little line that I liked. And I think I had maybe played the piano a while. I'd found that lead line that what the chorus has, and I really liked it. And so I brought it back, and I said, Madeline, let's start writing. So this is probably the most unique songwriting collaboration I've done. But I wrote the first line, she wrote a second line, I would write the second stanza, she would write the third stanza, and it got to a point where we were bouncing off of each other so well that it was done in 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I've never written a song that fast before with someone else, so it was awesome.
Yeah, that's really interesting. My next question you kind of just answered, but obviously took 45 minutes to finish that little section, but how long did it take starting from the first time you started writing it to the end and like the final recorded version?
Yes, we started writing it. We finished it within that day. We played it for our moms later, and I think we edited a couple lines, and then sat on it for a while. It wasn't until March of the following year, so this was written in July. It wasn't until the next March that she ended up flying down here to the studio and visited me, stayed with me in my dorm room, and we went to the studio and recorded the song together.
Yeah.
So after we recorded the song, I had the WAV file. It was produced over the summer. We ended up getting it. We were trying to make it in time for Mother's Day of that June, but it didn't end up working. And so I think it wasn't until later that July that we ended up releasing it. So it would say it took about a full year.
Yeah. But it's interesting with like a collaboration process, like sitting on it, like looking back, did she ever text you and be like, oh, could we change this line? Or did you ever do that with her?
Yes, we did. And we would call about it too. A lot of the debate was, well, how much do we want to write? Do we want to write a fourth verse talking about the end of life? Or do we want to finish the song at all? And so we did go back and forth for it, and there was a ton of collaboration that went into picking the album piece and finding the photo and finding, how we wanted to promote it on social media as well. So that took a long process.
Yeah.
And I do want to mention the start of this process was when we were 8 years old writing songs together.
Yeah.
I mean, Madeline and I have been cousins for our whole lives, and so we've gone through periods of hard frustrations with our songwriting, and it was really nice to be able to see it all pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. So is the album, the single cover, like, is it you and your mom or her and her mom?
It's her and her mom.
Oh, okay,
yes,
sweet.
and her mom's name is Renay, and I'm actually named after her.
Oh my gosh,
my
that's
middle name
cool.
Renay is after her. So it felt like a good closure for all of it.
Yeah, that's so sweet. I feel like, what were both of your guys' moms like reactions to hearing it?
Oh, well, as soon as we finished it that day, we brought them down and played it for them, and immediately they just started crying. I mean, it's a beautiful song, but it's also it's heartwarming, and it's almost a farewell to childhood and to girlhood and a hello to womanhood.
Oh, yeah, I really like that. And like, I feel like when I was listening to it, it kind of felt almost like bittersweet in a sense, because nostalgia is like an emotion that is bittersweet. Like, you're looking back on those things, you're like, oh, it makes me happy, but also like a little sad that time is gone.
Yeah.
But I feel like that song did a really good job, like kind of capturing the essence of nostalgia and like how happy it does feel, but also bittersweet looking back on it.
That is one of the very first lines in the song. You've nailed it.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of like collaboration, just working with others, how different is your process when you're writing by yourself in comparison to writing with other people?
Well, first, I'm usually a lot more frustrated with myself. There will be a lot more emotional outbursts where I slam the keys on the piano or I strum the guitar, and I'm just so upset with what I've gotten. But when I write by myself, it's usually just my own head spinning, and I have to use a voice memo to record it. When I'm writing with others, I try to think through what I'm doing more, and I'm a little bit more cautious as to what I put out on the table.
Yeah.
I usually want to give my best work to the other person to see what they think. I don't necessarily say I hold back from collaboration when I am working with somebody else, but I want to give my best, and so I try a little bit harder to make things fit and work.
Yeah. Do you feel like you ever get like kind of nervous to share like a lyric or a melody, like when you're with another person?
I would definitely say I don't try as many different outlooks as I would have.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll try many different routes, and my voice memos of me trying sound bad.
Yeah.
But sometimes it sticks, rather than when I'm working with someone else, and then I just try to give them the best that I have.
Yeah. So how about like from one person to another? Would you say collaborating usually looks pretty similar every time? Or does it drastically change depending on who you're working with?
It depends on who you're working with. Sometimes the person is really strong lyrically, or sometimes they're really strong musically. And so it does help if you know the person, if you know their heart, if you know how they think.
Yeah.
Because how they think reflects on how they write. But the GCU Songwriters Guild has actually been an amazing outlet for me to practice this. We collaborate every single week, and
that's cool.
when we do meet, it's about every other week when we meet. And so I've had a lot of practice writing on just a flurry of topics.
Yeah, that's really cool. Have you ever written with someone you didn't know very well?
Yes, it's always a cold write.
Okay.
It's always we're often given a topic, and we sit down for about an hour. I think there was one topic last year where we ended up writing about a bad first date.
Love that.
Or an embarrassing moment. And so then we sit down, and there's usually 4 or 5 of us, and we all have to write a song and finish it by the end of the hour.
Oh, wow. Okay. How do you feel like your songwriting skills have developed because of that?
Oh, I'm much more bold in what I offer. I am a little bit quicker to say, oh, I don't think that's going to work, or I think it will work, because every song is going to be a reflection of your own work, and if you're not proud of it, then it's not really worth putting in the time. And so I'm a lot quicker now that I've worked with others to say, oh, well, let's try this way, or let's try this instead.
Yeah, definitely. What's the hardest part about writing with another person?
Well, just like I'm scared to put things out there, they're scared to put things out there. Their emotions are tied into what they've done as well. So it's not just a business transaction, but it's a heart-to-heart. And so it's hard sometimes to communicate where you see the song going, but also hear where they want the song to go, and to communicate it in love and in grace. It's important to not snap back at them, but to say, okay, well, I like this, and what if we take a different direction? A lot of it balances on your communication.
Definitely. Have you ever like written with someone where they've like really, really struggled with being, I guess, vulnerable in their lyrics because they're writing with another person, and like if that did happen, like how did you kind of work to get them to open up a little bit more?
I've noticed that. I'm a little bit more of a leader personality myself, so when we do sit down for these Songwriter Guild meetings with 3 or 4 others, I'm often the one to bring the table to write.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll try to push other people to feel confident, because it is a safe space when we are writing. So I try to give them just like even a little smile, a sweet gesture, something like, oh, I really like this. Always give them a compliment, so that way they feel more bold and, enabled to write.
Yeah, definitely. Did you like the sandwich thing where it's like, good thing, like something we should probably change, and then another good thing?
Yes. Yep. I cling to I eat sandwiches. I mean, everything I do is great.
I mean, it works. Sometimes, like, you'll, like, do it and I feel like a lot of times I'll do it. It's not even, like, an intentional, like, I'm going to do the sandwich method. Like, I'm just kind of, like, I feel like that's a natural way to kind of, like, make people be secure in what they offer, but also, like, offer the things that could, like, potentially make it better.
And sometimes I won't even do the whole sandwich. It'll just be like the bread and the meat, and there won't be a top sandwich. I'll just say, well, let's try it a second time, but let's try it this way instead. Or do you have other ideas? Because it's not always my ideas aren't always going to be the right ones. It's going to be theirs that are right.
Definitely. And I feel like being open, like, I feel like a lot of people might struggle with that when it comes to collaboration, like being open to the ideas of another person. That's really important when co-writing and collaborating with people, because, like, if you're not open, then obviously it's not going to be the best process that it could be. So like being open and willing to, like, adjust what you offered, but also, like, be open to what they're offering consistently too, can, like, I guess, create the best work for sure.
It pushes you out of your comfort zone too. They might want to write the song in a different genre than you were thinking.
Yeah.
And, when you look back, you think, wow, that was actually really good. I liked what they did.
Definitely, yeah. So when you are writing with someone else, is it usually just for fun, or are you both kind of writing with the intention of maybe releasing it?
I would say there's been a mix. For those Songwriter Guild meetings, it's usually just for fun. Although some of those songs have gone on to do really well. For example, the song Down to the River that was released, that was written at a Songwriters Guild meeting.
That's cool.
So that's through the Canyon Worship album. My friend Megan Close and she did an amazing job collaborating with me, and when we sat down, our intention was to write a song for the Canyon Worship album. We wanted to write a song that other people could worship to and that would represent GCU well. And so our intention was to sit down and write a song that our, I guess, authorities would like, but then also had a little bit of twist in us in it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have, like, a favorite place to collaborate with people? Like, is it there wherever you're doing those collaborations, or like the studio, or like just your dorm?
Yeah, I mean, the dorm works great. There's usually a lot of privacy because it's just 2 of you working.
Yeah.
The studio's nice because you have a lot of access to different instruments.
Right.
So I would say anywhere there's a keyboard and you can always bring your guitar. A place in public is not usually the best because you're putting your stuff out there for the first time, and that can be really difficult.
Yeah. So can you describe your first time ever writing a song with another person, if you remember?
Yeah, I think it was actually with Madeline Grace, my cousin. I was 15 and she was 12. She flew down to my house for an Easter celebration and stayed with us for a little bit, and we ended up writing a song. She was very inspired that day as a 12-year-old, and she wanted to write a song about the American soldiers. Oh. And so I said, okay, let's go for it. And I put the musicality together, and she wrote most of the lyrics, and together ended up being pretty good. It was a hard process because she was 12 and I was 15, and we had very different directions and where we wanted to go.
That's what I was going to ask, because I feel like that'd be kind of hard.
I left a lot of those writing sessions with her just so frustrated. We both had a lot of maturing to do. Yeah. And so I'm glad that we're in a place now where things come a lot easier, but you have to learn the hard way sometimes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Do you ever experience, like, a mental block with writing with someone else, or do the lyrics flow better when you're collaborating?
It usually is, I would say it's in between. When it's somebody you don't know very well, there's usually a little bit of a block because all of you guys are scared to open up and to put your ideas out there. Definitely. When you're writing with someone you know much better, then words usually flow, and especially if they know how you think, then they can almost read what you're about to say and say it in their own way. Same vice versa for them.
Yeah, definitely. Do you ever do, like, Like, you know, when you go to those like group meeting things and they're like, let's do an icebreaker, like to get open and know each other better. Come on, guys, it'll be so fun. Like, do you ever kind of do something similar to that to get people to like?
I usually crack a joke.
Okay, valid.
I love puns, and so I'm usually like, I don't know, I usually say something stupid and it kind of lightens the mood for everyone.
Yeah.
So I'm usually out there, and then I volunteer to be like, well, you know, I can sing it in a silly voice if you guys want, or let's call someone else in here and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would assume it works. I feel like humor is like a really good way to get people to feel more comfortable, because like you can present yourself like not necessarily in a comedic way, but someone who is like open to joking and stuff like that. I feel like people naturally kind of like relax. So at least I do.
Yeah. And a lot of it starts too with talking about what we want the song to look like.
Yeah.
So when I'm in those cold writes, you know, being able to say, well, do you have any ideas? Let's talk it out first, rather than just somebody sitting down and putting their stuff out there. If you can talk about it, align on a similar vision, maybe a similar genre, then things can be a lot smoother.
Yeah, definitely. Have you ever growing up like tried to write music with someone who was not a songwriter?
Yeah, I've tried that before. Yes. And oftentimes it's usually me writing and them critiquing as we go along.
Yeah.
For example, my mother, she's not a songwriter, but she knows what sounds good and she knows what she likes.
Yeah.
And so I'll bring some of my stuff to her and I'll ask her, like, does this sound good? And usually she says, well, it's fine, but you could change this and that. And those critiques are awesome, because it's what the untrained ear is going to be looking for.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
It's what the, you know, public is going to want. And so having those critiques is the best way. Yeah,
absolutely. What are you more naturally drawn to when collaborating? Like, is it the lyrics or the melody or the instrumentation?
I would say it's usually the instrumentation. Oftentimes I'll have a big push for what I want the emotion to sound like, because the emotion and instrumentation are often connected.
Yeah.
So when it comes to lyrics, I like writing lyrics when it's my own stuff, because I can represent my own thoughts. But when I'm writing with others, I'd rather them take the lyrics and have them write, which is why Madeline's great, because she can write all the lyrics all day, any day. She's a poet and a wonderful one at that. So I will take the music and they'll do the lyrics.
Perfect. I feel like that's a really good dynamic to have.
I believe we're all given different gifts and talents, and I would rather feel comfortable in doing some more music and than having a little bit of a say for the lyrics.
Yeah, which makes total sense. So have you ever experienced like a creative difference when writing a song with another person that was hard to overcome? I know you mentioned like being younger with your cousin, but what about like kind of right now? Like, how often does that happen?
Yeah, I would say that happens pretty regularly. I mean, everyone's going to be so different. And so when I'm sitting down to write something and someone else comes in with a completely different idea and completely changes the song in my mind, it can be frustrating. Or I have to recognize that it's not going to be a song that I'm going to want to share as much.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, the other person can be the most talented songwriter, but if it's not what I want to do, then oftentimes I get in my head and it becomes all about me. And I hate having that posture, but it sometimes acts like that.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when like different genres, I feel like can be really hard to, because people get so like, I call it like kind of genre blocked. Like I only listen to this music, or like I hate this type of music. So maybe when you're writing with someone else who is extremely talented but they write exclusively like maybe country, but you're more like rock, and so like those genres kind of clash maybe. So writing and being open to, okay, well, let's have some influence can be challenging, but it can create something really, really cool.
Yes. My roommate and one of my dearest friends, McLaren Keffer, she was on this podcast earlier. She has a very different style of writing than I do. But I think her stuff is incredible when she just does an amazing job. And so we've written a couple things together, but most of the time it's like it has to be like a hodgepodge where I'll take one part and she'll take another part and we'll put it together and hope that it works.
Right. Yeah. How often does it like not work? Especially if you guys both have like different styles, like you kind of merge things together and like that doesn't really flow very well.
Yeah. Usually it takes one or the other of us adapting to their style. And so I'll say, okay, well, let's do it this because I know you're strong in this way. Or she'll come up with a lyric that I was really lacking. So you just have to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a lot easier when you're communicating with each other.
For sure. I feel like communication is key with like literally everything, especially in songwriting. Like, do you ever have a hard time like deciding who's gonna be the one to release the song, or do you sit down and be like, let's write a song for me to release or for you to release?
Usually it ends up being, we talk about that vision from the very beginning. So, and usually there's a clear leader in one of the songs, somebody who's taking the lead with certain things. So for my song that was on the Canyon Worship album, it's coming out in May, with Megan, she took the lead on that. And so it was nice to be able to help support her. And so I feel like an imposter having to speak on her behalf since she's graduated and live in Minnesota now. And then with Madeline and the song Like You, I ended up taking the lead for that song because it was more of what was on my heart. And so then I was the one in charge of releasing it and doing all the media. Whereas when Megan was overseeing everything, she took over that part.
Right. Have you ever like released a song, like someone else released it and you liked it so much and kind of wish that you had released it under your, does that ever happen?
Yes, I do actually, except I have the opportunity to release it because my friend Jocelyn Rosse, which she doesn't know this, so in case she ever happens to hear this podcast, surprise, Jocelyn, we're recording your song. But she wrote a song 2 years ago called Burden, and it's just talking about how the Lord says that we're not a burden even when we feel like it, and it's beautiful. I mean, it just struck me so much that I told her that, and I said, hey, it impacted my friends, and I shared your voice memo with others. She ended up giving me the song. She ended up saying, hey, Sarah, like, I worked on it, but I don't really want to do anything with it. You can have it. You can take it. And that was just a huge honor because she is so talented, and she worked on the song with another student here at GCU, Jonathan Reingruber, and he's a student engineer and producer at the studio, and together we're actually working on producing it and it being one of the songs that I release this semester.
Yeah. How much are you changing kind of like, or are you changing anything like when it comes to like the lyrics?
The lyrics are staying the same. I don't think there needs to be anything added to it. It's already long enough and it's beautiful as it is. But instrumentation wise, I want to bring in a lot more instruments. I want it to be very powerful. Yeah. And I want to bring in a choir.
That'll
just
be
a choir echoing, and I hope it can be all of Jocelyn's friends that are here on campus still.
That'll be so sweet. Yeah, choirs. Oh my gosh, that's like my favorite thing whenever I'm listening to, especially like worship music. Like, oh my gosh, it adds so much. Do you have any advice for someone who is intimidated by the idea of collaboration?
Absolutely. Like you said, number one, communication is key. You hear that in relationships and you hear that in businesses, but truly communication is key. Talk about your vision. Talk about how you want the song to sound. Talk about ideas. Talk about the lyrics. How many bridges do you want? How many verses do you want? And then after that, then you can sit down at the piano, or you can sit down and start thinking about lyrics.
Definitely. I feel like that's really good advice because sometimes communication can be kind of hard, especially when I get so excited sometimes, like I want to skip over the stuff that like you need to do and just dive right in, but then that can obviously create like some problems if you don't plan stuff out.
Yes. And communication can also reveal where your partner's at, especially if it's a cold write and you've never met them and you don't know what you're writing about. When you're talking through, it gives you a little glimpse into how they think and maybe their strengths. And so then you can work well together after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have some questions from the listeners about your song Like You and just songwriting in general. So I'll just dive into that portion right now. So the first question is, did you write Like You about yourself, or is it written from the perspective of someone else?
It's written from my own perspective. However, I have not gone through motherhood and I have not gone through a wedding. And so it's a glimpse of myself that I see in the future.
Okay, yeah. Who would be your dream artist to collaborate and co-write with, either past or present?
I would love to work with Matthew West. He's awesome. Jonathan Grable is also great. I had the opportunity to meet him, and he critiqued some of my stuff.
Oh, cool.
And then I think that some of these new Christian artists, Kobe James and a couple others, they're doing really well right now, so I would love to work with them.
Yeah. So third question. It sounds like You was written about your mom. What are some things in life that have made you appreciate your mom and not take her for granted?
I appreciated all of her boundaries that she set up for us growing up. I appreciated the way that she loved my dad and set an example of what a godly wife should be like. She really works hard, and I realize now that everything she's done since I was born has been for our future and for our good.
Yeah. So this is the last question from the listeners. Is it easier for you to express love and emotion through a song than other typical ways of expressing love? Would you say songwriting is like a sixth love language?
Yes, absolutely. When I share a song with somebody, you know that I trust you. And when I share a song about something that's happening right now in my life, even more so. Even more so.
Yeah, definitely. So now I have just some fun, like, rapid fire questions to kind of close this out. Always the best part. So the first question, if for the rest of your life you could only listen to one song, what would it be?
Either Amazing Grace or Agnus Dei by Michael W. Smith.
Wow, okay, perfect. Second question, do you prefer writing lyrics down on paper or using digital notes?
I used to like paper, but digital notes are just so much easier to send.
So convenient, too. Like, let's just really quickly type it out for sure. So, third question. What season would you describe your music taste as? Either winter, spring, summer, fall?
I think it's fall. It's a little reflective on all the stuff that happened over the summer, but there has some sadder tones to it.
Yeah.
Like you're moving in. It's not complete winter, but you're getting there.
Slowly developing into it. What do you prefer, writing by yourself or with other people?
I actually prefer writing by myself, but all my best work has come with writing from other people.
Okay,
so I should really take a listen for myself and change that.
Okay, so last question for the rapid fire portion. If all the songs you've ever written were a color, what would it be?
Purple, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
purple. A little bit warm, a little bit melancholy, but bright too. Yeah,
that's good. I love that. Okay, so well, that brings us to the end of another wonderful conversation here on Voices of the Canyon. I cannot thank you enough, Sarah, for coming on here today and talking about your experience. It's been so wonderful. I'm your host, Andrea Cunningham. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next week.